Hey everyone, welcome to the video. This is one of my core plays for week 17 of the NFL season on Draftkings, and we are here. This is it. This is the end of the regular season for the 2019 NFL season. It sucks, but hopefully you guys have had a fantastic year. I'm going to be still doing content for the playoffs as well, so we got another month to look forward to for NFL DFS content. But for the regular season, that is it. I hope you guys had a great year. It was a pretty good year for me. Hopefully I've been of some, at least some help to you guys as well. I do appreciate all the people tuning in to watch these videos. It was my first year doing it. We got over 3,000 subscribers, so not too bad, I don't think. I'm not sure what to gauge it off of, but not too bad. I do appreciate all this, all the people watching the videos, leaving likes, subscribing, leaving comments, and I do appreciate, especially the Patreon supporters. Double thanks to you guys as well. It really means a lot. And before we continue, as always, if you guys could just leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Really helps me out. Really appreciate it. You can also follow me on Twitter, ChrisPinell16. And if you're interested in any of the extra content I do every single week or every single night for the NBA season, because I will be here for the playoffs as well for NFL. So like this isn't it for the NFL videos. I'm going to be here for the playoffs, but I also do NBA as well. So if you want access to my spreadsheets about every single week or night and my Discord chat, links in the description below. And without further ado, I'll stop talking on the intro. Let's get into the main portion of this video. So week 17, it is... Let me tell you, it's hurting my brain going through this slate because there's teams that may sit players, there's teams that might not sit players, there's teams that have to wait on the outcomes of other games to know if they can sit players or not. So, there's a lot going on here. We got to know which bench players might see some extended run here. We'll see. We'll get through it, but I'll try my best here to give you guys the best info I can as of right now on Thursday. I mean, we'll know more by Saturday and whatnot. I'll do my lineup video by then, but as of right now, this is just the info I'm going off of. So, at quarterback, obviously Lamar Jackson's going to be out. Patrick Mahomes, not a lot of interest there. Drew Brees, I prefer the run game, so I'm looking at ALVIN, KAMARA, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Aaron Rodgers, fine matchup versus Detroit, but the first guy I want to highlight is Ryan Tannehill here at 6,800 going up against Houston, and I think he's a pretty solid play this week. Does it feel a little bit overpriced? Yes, it's the most expensive he's been all season, but in week 17, it's usually a good idea to target players from teams that have something to play for, and the Titans are one of the top teams that fit that mold here this week. They are playing for their playoff lives here, and I'd expect the Titans to come out very, very sharp in this game. And also, if the Chiefs do win at 1 p.m., this game's played at 4:25, so the Texans may know if they can rest their starters or not, and I would expect the Chiefs to win that game. So more than likely, Ryan Tannehill is going to be going up against a Houston team that has no incentive to even try in this game, which I think Ryan Tannehill going up against people that really aren't trying that hard should be able to have a pretty good game because he's done very well against teams that are trying. And the Houston defense is already bad enough, so I can't imagine how bad they are without some of their key starters mixed in there if this happens to be the case. And as of right now, this game does feature a 45-point over-under, which doesn't sound great, but it's actually not that bad on this slate. Not a lot of high totals. We don't even have a game over 50 this week. And it's a great matchup as well. Houston's allowing 23.5 points per game to quarterbacks, which is fifth most in the NFL. And they even allowed Jameis Winston to get over 300 yards and a couple of touchdowns without like two of his main targets. And just on average, they're allowing 285 yards and 2 touchdowns, which I will take that. Obviously, I'm hoping for more, but I would take that as an average. And Ryan Tannehill, he's been very, very good, too. Like, since week 7 when he got the starting job, he's quarterback 3, only behind Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. That's pretty darn good. And he's not a dink and dunker either. It's not how he's making his money right now. He is going down the field. He actually leads the league with 9.6 yards per attempt. That's more than Patrick Mahomes, gunslinger. So Ryan Tannehill he's been a gunslinger. He's throwing the ball down the field, and it's working. And the emergence of A.J. Brown has certainly helped as well. It provides a big boost. That guy is awesome. I think he's going to be very, very good in years to come. I mean, he's already good now, but I mean, like, just down the road, I think he's going to be a really good receiver. And he just dropped 25 points versus these guys 2 weeks ago. He was 22 for 36, 2 touchdowns, had a rushing touchdown as well, 25 fantasy points. So I think he's a solid play here. Don't see why he can't do well. He's been having a very good season, and he looks like a pretty good quarterback. And, he gets Derrick Henry back, which, the defense is going to have to worry about the run, so it's going to open up some things on the field as well. So Ryan Tannehill, he's a little expensive, but, I want players that have incentive to win, and Ryan Tannehill and the Titans, they're going to have to come out sharp to win this game, and it's a great matchup, so I don't see why we can't target Ryan Tannehill there. Deshaun Watson, he could potentially not play, so I'm not interested either way. I mean, there's no really reason to want to play Deshaun Watson. Jameis Winston, I like him, but I'd rather play Matt Ryan for 100 less, so I'm going to highlight him because this is my core plays video. I'm not going to talk about every single player in depth. So I don't mind Winston, but I prefer Matt Ryan. So I'm going to highlight Matt Ryan here at 6,500. And now these two teams, they don't have anything to play for. It really just besides wanting to beat your divisional rival. So we'll be a full go here for both teams. And this is actually one of the better games for fantasy purposes according to Vegas. We have a 47-point over-under, which is second highest on the slate. We have two pretty below average defenses facing off as well, so I can get on board with a decently high scoring game. Now I will say that both defenses have actually been playing a little bit better recently, but you know, I think we can get some points scored in this game. Now, I will say the first matchup between these two were pretty disappointing, actually. It was Week 12 versus Tampa. 22 and 35 points. That's not too bad, but I mean, like, for Matt Ryan and Julio Jones, which was the main portion, you know, the main people were targeting, he was 23 for 46, no touchdowns, 1 pick, 9 points. I believe Matt Schaub came into the game, and then Calvin Ridley ended up scoring the touchdown, but it was a pretty big dud for the Falcons for the most part, besides Calvin Ridley, but I don't remember if Austin Hooper, what he did in that game. I feel like he had a good game, but I don't remember off the top of my head. I could double check that. But either way, it was very disappointing for Matt Ryan, and he absolutely sucked as massive chalk. He was 52% owned in cash games that week. But I will say the Tampa Bay defense has been playing a lot better recently, and they're actually all the way up to 12th DVOA versus the pass, and earlier in the year they were like 30th, so they've definitely been improving, but it's still easier to throw on these guys as they are first DVOA versus the run. So I would expect a pass-heavy attack for Matt Ryan and Julio Jones and company, and they're still allowing 22.1 points per game to quarterbacks, which is 8th most in the NFL, 286 passing yards per game, couple of touchdowns. So Matt Ryan, I think he's fine at this price point, and I would expect, you know, pretty pass-heavy attack, and they actually are 2-point underdogs here, so I like Matt Ryan quite a bit at 6,500. I think he's a pretty solid play. If you guys see me blinking a lot, I don't know, my eyes hurt right now, so might be blinking a little too much, but just ignore my eyes. Anyway, Daniel Jones versus Philly, it's interesting. You know, he's coming off a huge game. I really can't trust Daniel Jones at 6,400. I mean, just give me Matt Ryan for 100 more. I'll trust Matt Ryan all day more than I would Daniel Jones. Jared Goff. So I originally liked him a lot. Like, he was like looking to be my quarterback one this week, but now there's a report that the Rams might rest their key starters, and even if they do play, how long do they even play? So I'm not going to take a risk of someone that might sit a portion of the game or maybe even not play. So I can't play any of the Rams with any confidence besides the backup. So I'm going to have to pass on Jared Goff despite it being like the nuts matchup. I mean, it doesn't get better than this. He had like 320 passing yards versus them in one half a few weeks ago, but I just can't play someone that just might not play or just might get benched halfway through the game. So not a risk I'm willing to take. I know week 17, it's nuts. You kind of have to figure these things out, but I'm not going to take an unnecessary risk when I could play Carson Wentz for 100 less, and he's in a great matchup as well. And he might just be my favorite quarterback this week. Now, if Zach Ertz is out, it might hurt that a little bit, but again, the Eagles are in a win and in situation here, as they will be the NFC East champs if they win this game. And I like guys that have incentive to win the game. That's what we have to look for week 17, because a lot of these teams, really, who cares? So he's also in very good form right now, and that's despite having guys pretty much just picking wide receivers off the street and plugging them in. He's been very good. He's been throwing the ball a lot. 40 pass attempts, 43, 50, 46, 45, 40. He's been throwing the ball a ton. In the past, 4 games, he's been playing very well. 28 versus Miami, 23 versus the Giants, 22 versus Washington, 21 versus Dallas. Those are 3 pretty good matchups. The Dallas matchup is pretty middle of the road, but he's been playing very well. I don't see why that can't continue here for Carson Wentz, especially going up against the Giants. I mean, he just scored 23 fantasy points versus the Giants, threw the ball 50 times. Overtime helped out a little bit, but still, very good games. 4 in a row, very solid games, and he was on a really big cold stretch beforehand, so it's nice to see him in good form. And he's still relatively pretty cheap too. His price, this is actually the second cheapest. No, I'm sorry, only the second most expensive he's been third most expensive. Sorry, got my mind mixed up. So it's really not that bad of a price, is what I'm trying to say, at 6,100. And we get a great matchup versus the Giants. They're just straight trash versus the pass. That rhymed. They're allowing 23 points per game to quarterbacks, which is 4th most in the NFL. 31st DVOA versus the pass. And the only really problem I would have with Carson Wentz is he barely has anyone to throw the ball to, although that really hasn't stopped him recently. And Ertz is also shaping up to be a true game-time decision because he has not practiced yet this week. And if Ertz is out, that would obviously be a big blow because he's their best pass catcher on this offense by far. But New York is so bad defensively versus the pass, and this is a must-win situation as the Cowboys should easily beat the Redskins. I think Carson Wentz will be just fine here. The Eagles will figure out a way to win this game. Maybe they involve Miles Sanders out of the backfield a little bit more. Maybe they rely on Miles Sanders on the ground more. Hopefully not. Hopefully they throw the air more, but I think Ertz will play because this is a very important game, and he probably won't be 100%, but either way, I still think Wentz is a pretty solid option at 6,100. The Eagles have a pretty decently high team total, so I think Carson Wentz is definitely a solid play on this slate. I also don't mind Tom Brady here. I should say Josh Allen. I hear rumblings that the Bills, they have absolutely no reason to play, so I don't see why Josh Allen would really need to push it. Maybe they play him for a little bit and pull him. Not totally sure. I haven't had definitive news on that yet. I don't know. Maybe it's on here. Majority of the Bills to play. Okay, so we'll see. Maybe they play a couple drives. Maybe they play a quarter. Maybe they play a half. Not sure. I'm not going to risk it. I mean, there's just too much risk in playing a guy that could potentially sit, especially when there's no reason for them to play. Now, Tom Brady, surprisingly, in Week 17, the Patriots have a reason to want to win this game, and you can't get better of a matchup here versus Miami. Now, the Patriots historically struggle versus Miami, but that's in Miami. They're playing at Foxborough, so they should be just fine. And if they win this game, I mean, they want to win this game so they can try to get a bye week. But it's a great matchup versus Miami. They're the 32nd DVOA pass defense this year. They're getting shredded on the ground. They're getting shredded through the air. Tom Brady, I think he can throw a couple touchdowns and just call it a day. And, they're going to want to come in good form, so I think they're going to come out and have a pretty good outing. I think Tommy Touchdown can throw a couple of touchdowns here, so I don't mind him here at 6K. It's a pretty fair price, and I think he can get you 18 to 20 some fantasy points with upside of more. Obviously, if Edelman is out in this game, that would hurt his upside, but that's something to keep your eyes on. But I think Tom Brady is a pretty solid play at 6K. Not my most favorite play, but I'll take pretty much anybody playing Miami. We saw what Andy Dalton did to them last week. Pretty much had like 40 fantasy points, so I think Tom Brady can at least do half of that. Now, scrolling down a little bit, there is actually a cheap quarterback I do have interest in this week. And you could play RG3 because he has rushing upside, but it's a really tough matchup versus Pittsburgh. And there's key starters out for Baltimore, so the upside's not the same. And obviously, RG3 is nothing even close to Lamar Jackson. So I actually think there's a better, cheaper option here. And he's all the way down at 4,500, and that's going to be Brett Hundley as soon as I can find him. So Brett Hundley. Now, I will say Kyler Murray is questionable. He did practice Tuesday and he's still limited on Thursday, but I see no reason to push him to play with a hamstring pull in a meaningless game. Like, why risk anything with your young quarterback, especially in a meaningless game versus the Rams? So I think Brett Hundley just gets the start here, and he's pretty much at min price, so I don't see why we can't have interest here. And I did see a report that the Rams may or probably will rest their key studs. I've yet to hear anything official on all of that, but I'm pretty sure Ramsey's out, and it would definitely help not having Aaron Donald in his face all game. That would make it much easier on Brett Hundley. And the main thing I like here is that he presents us rushing upside. And if we're going to give me rushing upside at 4,500 from a quarterback, yeah, I'll take that all day. I don't care who you're playing at 4,500. Just give me some rushing yards and maybe throw a touchdown or two, and I'll take it. And in very short time in the game that he played versus Seattle, he actually had 6 carries for 35 yards, and I'll take that all day. 6 carries and limited work, I will take it. And he's certainly capable of running the system Cliff has put in place, and he's cheap, so I do think he's a pretty fine option on this slate. I don't expect much, but you don't need much at this price at 4,500. So against the Rams, who really have nothing to play for, and if they rest some key starters on defense, especially someone like Aaron Donald, I think Brett Hundley can have a fine day. So don't mind him at near min price. And there's a couple of other cheap quarterbacks you could use, but I think Brett Hundley stands out as my favorite. Okay, so on to the running back position. This is not a week I think you have to play Christian McCaffrey. There's some weeks that I feel like you should probably lock him in. This is not one of those weeks. I feel like we can get away with it. Although I did say that someone on the Panthers coaching staff said they want CMC to make history. I think he's going to have a good game. I'm not saying he's not going to have a good game, but there's some other cheaper running backs that I think have similar upside, and I'd rather play them. So we're going to scroll down a little bit. I will say Saquon Barkley is always fine. Aaron Jones, he had a blow-up game last time, and he's capable of those blow-up games. It's a great matchup versus Detroit, one of the worst rush defenses in the NFL. Green Bay is heavy favorites here, so it does actually line up like it should be a pretty good game for Aaron Jones, and they do have incentive to win this game. But I want to go a little bit cheaper, and I want to play Zeke here at 8K. Well, Derrick Henry, he's fine versus Houston. I mean, he should have a solid game. But I like Zeke here at 8K. I'll save any little bit I can, and I think he has similar upside. So he's 8K. And again, I want players from teams that have incentive to win, and Zeke definitely fits that category. If the Cowboys win and the Eagles lose, believe it or not, the Cowboys would actually be able to make the playoffs. I mean, they're 7-8 right now, but it's still possible. That's just how bad the NFC East has been this season. And with Dak not being 100%, he's got that shoulder injury. I'd expect a heavy dose of Zeke in this game. Now, you would have thought the same thing last week. He only had 13 carries, but he still had 7 targets. So maybe that's going to lead to more checkdowns if Dak can't go all the way down the field. So either way, I think Zeke gets you 20-plus touches in this game. And this is an excellent matchup for Zeke. First off, Dallas is 10.5 favorites at home, which I love my running backs, especially someone like Zeke, who's not a huge pass catcher most weeks, although we've seen some weeks he had 10 targets and 7 targets, but I mostly, would expect like 4 to 5 targets from Zeke. Those are some more outlier games, but if that happens, obviously I won't be complaining. I'll be very happy about it, but either way, I think that you're going to play with the big lead here, and we saw what happened when they played with the big lead versus the Rams. He had 24 carries, 117 yards, 4 targets, 34 fantasy points. I could honestly see something similar happening again, again this week versus the Redskins, and they also have a 27-point implied team total. I think a lot of that can happen from some Zeke goal line touchdowns. And Washington, this is an amazing matchup. Like I said, they've been absolutely murdered on the ground recently by the likes of Saquon Barkley, Miles Sanders, Aaron Jones. They crushed versus Washington in the past 3 games. They're allowing 179 rushing yards per game, and they're 25th DVA versus the run. So this sets up as a really nice Zeke game in my opinion. So definitely don't mind him being your RB1 this week, and you save some salary off of guys like a little bit just off of Derrick Henry and Aaron Jones. I think these are all fine options, and they actually all have incentive to win this game. So I don't think you can go wrong with either of these 3. I'm not just going to sit here and tell you all 3 of these guys are core plays, because that's just not realistic. You can't play all 3 of these guys. So I would pick Zeke because he's just a little bit cheaper, and I love the matchup. So I like Zeke a lot, and then I also like Alvin Kamara quite a bit at 7,800. I think he's a fantastic play this week, and I'm pretty much looking to lock him in. And he actually looked good last week, and it was a tough matchup too versus Tennessee. They have one of the better run defenses in the NFL. I believe they're 5th DVA versus the run, and he came out and smashed. He had 11 carries, 80 yards, had a nice 40-yard touchdown. Didn't even get touched, I don't think. Had 2 touchdowns, 7 targets, 6 catches, 30 yards, 29 fantasy points. His best game since, I believe, Seattle, if I remember correctly. Yeah, since Seattle, we had 37 fantasy points. So it's actually, I think it's the second best game all season. And the thing was, the touchdowns finally came. Like I said, he only had 2 touchdowns all year heading into that game. And last year, he scored 18. So touchdown regression was coming, and it finally came. And he got 2 touchdowns, and I don't see how it doesn't continue again, because this is an amazing matchup versus Carolina. I've been targeting running backs versus Carolina for like pretty much every single week now, as it just tends to work out every single week. They're 32nd DVA versus the run, allowing 32 points per game to running backs, which is most in the NFL. They've also allowed 25 rushing touchdowns this season. 25. That is by far the most. That's the most by 9. Most teams are like 1 to 2 within each other. They're 9 ahead of the pack. I mean, they're getting absolutely slaughtered on the ground. And now you're going to present one of the best offenses in the NFL versus the Carolina Panthers, one of the best offensive lines. I don't see how Alvin Kamara does not eat here. They're allowing 130 rushing yards per game. And also, most importantly, the Saints in Week 17, they have incentive to win for a higher seed here. So they're going to be coming out firing. Now, I wish they were at home, because I think they would just absolutely smash. But on the road, they'll still be fine. And they're also 13-point favorites, and they have a near 30-point team total. So no matter what, I think Alvin Kamara is a pretty good place. He's always safe with his targets. If he's not getting it going on the ground, which I don't see how he doesn't versus Carolina, he'll be fine through the air. I mean, his targets every week are so safe. He's averaging 7 targets per game. He has a 20% target share, which are all pretty much right up there with CMC. I think CMC is the only one that's above him right now in terms of through the air for a running back. So Alvin Kamara, I think he's a fantastic play. He looked pretty healthy last week, so don't mind firing him up. I would say he's probably my favorite RB of the week for sure. Nick Chubb, good matchup versus Cincy. Joe Mixon, good matchup versus Cleveland. You could play both of them, but I would much rather play Kamara and Zeke, because I just feel like they present me safer floors. Kenyon Drake, he's been absolutely awesome, and again, if Rams are sitting key starters, it would definitely be a plus. And they more than likely won't have Kyler Murray, so they might lean on Kenyon Drake even more. So I could see him having a pretty good game. But at 7,100, he's no longer a value, but he's no longer a value running back. The guy's a stud. He looks great out there. We could talk about Marlon Mack for a little bit. He comes in at 6,900, and I actually think he's a solid play. Now, I didn't get as much work as I would have liked. I know Wilkins was a little bit involved last week, but the Colts also scored 2 punt return touchdowns, so it's not like he had to be on the field too much because they kept returning punt return touchdowns. But still, I think he's a fine play. He still had 16 carries, 95 yards, and a touchdown. Would have liked for a little bit more, but still looked good out there. And this is just a straight matchup play. Now, I can't ever play Marlon Mack when they are dogs, but they also come because he just really doesn't have any involvement in the passing game. He actually had 2 targets last week, which is the most he's had since what? Yeah, 2 targets since since week 8 before that game. So the targets were nice to see, and this is just such a good matchup. He had the best matchup you can ask for last week versus Carolina. Now you get the second best matchup you can ask for versus Jacksonville. They're giving up 31 points per game to running backs. They're 31st DVOA versus the run. They've allowed the second most rushing touchdowns per game. And the last game he played versus Jacksonville, he was killing them. Then he hurt his hand. He had 14 carries, 109 yards, and a touchdown. Got pulled early. Then the backup's absolutely crushed. So I don't see why he can't do that again. I'm gonna pause this. I got a cough really bad. All right, so I gotta get some water too. But anyway, I forget where I left off, but either way, I like Marlon Mack at 6,900. The Colts are favored here by a little bit. They're on the road, but Jacksonville got such a bad run defense. I think Marlon Mack is a fine option here. Not a core play for me because he's a little priced up, but don't hate him. It just doesn't really have much receiving upside. So Miles Sanders is going to be the lead back, even with Jordan Howard returning, and that's deservedly so. The past 2 weeks he has been crushing, but he is not a core play for me on this slate. I will say that. Todd Gurley, don't know if he's going to even play. Devonta Freeman, tough matchup versus Tampa Bay. Ingram's out. Jacobs is questionable. We'll see if he plays or not. I know he had a surgery today as something minor, but I really wouldn't expect him to play, but we'll see. Philip Lindsay, 6,100. Again, he had a good game last week, but not someone I really want to trust. 19 carries were nice, 109 yards, 1 touchdown. Did have 3 targets for 9 yards. It's a good matchup versus Oakland. But I just don't really like Lindsay at this price tag. I like him when he's around 5K, and then he jumped him all the way up to 6,100. I just think there's better plays, to be honest. So I don't hate Philip Lindsay, but not a core play for me. Melvin Gordon, I think they're going to be playing from behind. I originally liked him earlier in the week, but the more I think about it, the lower I'm getting on Melvin Gordon. It's a good matchup versus Kansas City. I'm just afraid that this might be more of an Austin Eckler game if the Chargers fall behind, because they have not been. Phillip Rivers has not been playing that well, and the Chiefs have a really good pass defense, and I could just see the Chiefs pouring it on here. We'll see. I mean, if the game stays close, I think Melvin Gordon's a good play just because he's going to get volume. The last 2 weeks really has not gotten that much volume, but he's gotten volume to the air, at least 7 targets the past 2 weeks. But before that, 12 carries, 20, 14. Last game versus Kansas City, had 12 points, did not get into the end zone. I think Eckler even ended up having the better game, but it's a fantastic matchup. But I'm worried about volume if they fall behind, which is definitely possible versus Kansas City. So I wouldn't call him a core play. If you have 6K left in your lineup and you want to throw Melvin Gordon in it, I don't hate it. But again, not a core play for me. James White, you're going to get passing volume. He would benefit if Julian Edelman happened to miss the game. Let's see. These are going down the list here. There's not a lot of good cheap options. I know James White, he had a sucky game versus Buffalo, 6.9 points. But other than that, he's actually been pretty solid. Now, he had the Doug game versus Dallas. But other than that, he's pretty much been double-digit points almost every single week. I believe he had a good game versus Miami. Not a good game, but he did have that receiving touchdown. I thought he might have done more, but he still had 11 fantasy points. Not a core play for me. I keep talking. I keep wanting to talk about almost all the players in this slate, but this is a core plays video, so I'll try to keep this shorter. But so cheap running back we could look at. I don't hate Damien Williams here at 4,700. Now, I wouldn't say he's a great play, but we don't have really any solid relief running backs, and typically that's what we're going to look for in most slates, so we'll see. But Damien Williams, I don't hate it. Spencer Ware was short-lived as he's now on the IR, and Shady keeps getting healthy scratch, so it's hard to trust him, but he is expected to be back in the mix this week. But I'm going to imagine D will retain, the starting role here. He's not going to take every single snap, but I think he'll be fine. I think he gets the majority of the work here, and I think they're going to try to keep LaShawn McCoy healthier for the playoffs. I really don't think the Chiefs are going to struggle too much with the Los Angeles Chargers, so I think he'll be fine. And Kansas City also has incentive to win this game. They can move up a little bit if they happen to win. And last week, Damien had 16 carries, 3 targets, had a pretty decent game, 65 yards, got into the end zone on a receiving touchdown, 3 targets, 3 catches, 27 yards, 18 fantasy points. Again, LaShawn McCoy was out, so you really can't use that as a sample, but he's capable of having good games, and they actually have a 27-point team total, which is pretty good. They're 8.5-point favorites at home, so this would set up pretty well for D. Will as long as they get the majority of these snaps. I don't know how often LaShawn McCoy is going to come in. I assume they're going to split. It's going to be somewhat of a split. It's just not going to be a Damien Williams show. But if I had to guess which running back gets the most work here, I'm going to have to guess it's Damien Williams. I think they're going to try to keep LaShawn McCoy healthy. And it's a great matchup, too. The Chargers are 23rd DVOA versus the run, and allowing the 12th most points per game to running back. So I think Damien Williams is a fine play. Now, I'm worried a little bit about LaShawn McCoy being listed back. Before I actually had my notes written on this play, I didn't hear the LaShawn McCoy news yet, so that's going to hurt him a little bit. But we don't have a lot of cheap options down here, so we're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel. We could also look at DeAndre Washington if Josh Jacobs happens to be out. And he's actually yet to practice. I'm doubting he plays, but he seems like a tough guy, so it would not surprise me if he does come out and play. But if not, Washington will be the lead back again, and he hasn't disappointed in his 2 starts yet. And he was not completely free like he was the first 2 times. He was 3K versus Tennessee, and he was 4K versus the Chargers. Now he's all the way up to 5,200, so it's going to be tougher for him to hit value. But again, I want players on teams that need to win, and they need to win. Believe it or not, the 4 things that needed to happen last week for the Raiders, they actually happened, and now they need 4 more things to happen this week. And honestly, it can realistically happen. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but when I was looking at the chart of what needed to happen for the Raiders, it's very possible. So they might make the playoffs here. So with Jacobs out, Washington has received 63% of the snaps in those 2 games, and he has dominated the touches as well. He had 14 carries, 7 targets the first game. Then he had 23 carries versus the Chargers and 3 targets in the last one with 18 fantasy points. So pretty solid days either way. Now, I will say DeAndre Washington sucked in the first half of this game. I think he had like 1 or 2 points heading into the half, and he turned it up. He had a nice 13-yard, I believe it was a 13-yard touchdown, or no, I think the touchdown was like 6 yards. I was thinking of something else, but either way, it was fine. As for the matchup, it's not great, but it's not terrible either. Denver is 19th DVOA versus the run, so you can run on Denver. It's not the greatest matchup in the world, but I think they'll be fine here, and the Raiders are going to want to win this game, so I think DeAndre Washington is a fine game. And again, some people are going to be sitting, so you could look at maybe someone like Gus Edwards. It's not a great matchup, especially with some of the key starters being out. And, Lamar Jackson definitely helps these running backs because the defense has to worry about Lamar Jackson running the ball. Obviously, he's going to be out. RG3, he can also run the ball, but obviously not. RG3 can't do that as well as Lamar Jackson, so it's going to hurt the run game a little bit. But Gus Edwards should see some more work. You could look at him. Now, honestly, I think that Justice Hill might get some more work because, if Mark Ingram's, I believe it's a calf issue, lingers into the playoffs even more, they're going to want to keep Gus Edwards pretty fresh because he's actually not a bad running back. So if they want to keep him more fresh, you could look at Justice Hill here at 4,600. He actually broke off a 18-yard touchdown in the last game versus Cleveland, had 14 fantasy points. I could see him getting some extended run too. Again, it's a sucky matchup, and starters are going to be out for Baltimore, so it's going to be tougher on this pretty good Steelers run defense. So don't love them, but they will see extended work. And I don't hate SONY MICHEL either. I think he's a fine play going up against the Miami Dolphins. They are 27th DVOA versus the run. I mean, the 6th most points per game to running backs. And we've seen it the last 2 weeks. The volume has ramped up for SONY MICHEL. And we saw this last year, too. The Patriots were riding SONY MICHEL into the playoffs, into a championship as well. They were giving him as many carries as they can. And maybe this was their plan. Maybe they were, keeping his workload soft for the most part. I mean, he had some volume earlier in the year, but then they tallied it off a little bit. And then the past 2 games in good matchups, 19 carries, 21 carries. He had 2 targets the past 2 games as well. 11 fantasy points in each game. Didn't get into the end zone, although he did score a touchdown the last game. But, they said the coach called his timeout, so they called it back. They brought in Rex Burkhead. It happens sometimes, touchdown variance. But I think SONY MICHEL has a good chance of getting into the end zone here versus Miami. And they are 16-point favorites. So this would set up pretty well for a big SONY MICHEL game. We've seen running backs destroy Miami recently, so don't hate it. And again, the Patriots actually have the incentive to win this game, so it's not like they're not going to try. So I think SONY MICHEL can have a pretty solid game at 4,900. I know he doesn't present us much receiving upside, but I don't think he has to have receiving upside in this game to pay off his salary. So SONY MICHEL, definitely someone to keep your eyes on. And then I think that's about it for the running back position. Besides KAMARA, besides really these top-end guys, it gets pretty gross pretty fast. There's not a lot of good mid-range plays that I really like too much. So not the best week for running back. So I think I'm gonna lock in Zeke and KAMARA. For sure, I'm going to I'm for sure I'm going to lock in KAMARA. We'll see about anyone else, but KAMARA is definitely my lock at running back this week as of right now. So now we'll go into the wide receiver position. Obviously, Michael Thomas, you can play him every single week. Never have a problem with that. But I like the two wide receivers below him because they're quite a bit cheaper. I mean, paying $10K for a wide receiver is rough. I know it's Michael Thomas, and he's pretty much the safest wide receiver you can play every single week. But I just have a hard time paying $10K for a wide receiver. And if I'm going to play KAMARA, I really don't want to play too many Saints in my lineup. So I'm going to look at Julio Jones here, 8,500. I think he's an awesome play this week. And he's also a little bit cheaper than Michael Thomas, 1,400 cheaper, and they got similar upside too. So I'll take the discount with Julio Jones. And he's been a straight up stud the past 2 weeks. The past 2 weeks, he's had 35 targets. 35. He had 20 targets versus San Francisco, 15 targets versus Jacksonville, 41 points and 29 points. I don't see how he can't have a good game here versus Tampa Bay. And, you know, he smashes Tampa Bay in his career. He's like a part-time owner of that franchise. In 15 games versus them in his career, he has 107 catches, over 1,700 yards, 11 touchdowns. That's a pretty good full season. That was in 15 games versus them. So he straight up smashes versus Tampa Bay for the most part. Week 12, he disappointed with only 5 catches for 60 yards, still had 10 targets, but disappointed nonetheless, 11 fantasy points. But I think he bounces back here and he continues. I think he gets, I wouldn't surprise me if he got 15 targets again, 15 to 20 targets. It's definitely possible. No Calvin Ridley, so I like Julio Jones quite a bit. And yeah, Tampa Bay's defense has gotten better, sure, but they're still not that good versus wide receivers, and really no one can stop Julio. There's no one on that defense that can stop Julio. The only one that can really stop Jones here in this matchup would be Matt Ryan having a bad game, and Matt Ryan's been pretty solid for the most part this season. And they're giving up 46.3 points per game to wide receivers, which is the most by 4. I mean, that's a pretty sizable margin when you look at it. Most of the teams are like decimal points within each other. They're the worst by 4. So they're getting killed outside. They're allowing 200 receiving yards to wide receivers per game, 1.4 touchdowns. And I think most of this goes to Julio Jones here. I know Russell Gage exists, but I think Julio Jones just absolutely dominates. And there should be a pass-heavy attack against the league's #1 rush defense. And we have a 48-point total with a 2-point spread in Tampa's favor. So I don't see how, this just it sets up perfect for Julio Jones, and he's dominating most categories. We don't have to worry about volume ever. He'll pass Mike Evans in air yards this week because he's right behind Mike Evans in air yards, and obviously Evans isn't going to play, so Julio Jones will pass him right up, be the league leader in air yards. He's at 1,800 right now, and he's 6th in target share, he's 7th in weighted opportunity share. Nothing not to like about Julio Jones. I think he smashes versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. DAVANTE Adams, I like him as well. They actually have incentive to win this game. The Packers can lock up a bye week if they can win this game. And I don't see how Adams flops here. He's been very good the past 2 weeks. He's been very good the 3 of the past 4 weeks. Washington game, of course, I played him versus Washington. He gets 8 points, of course. He only has 6 targets in that game for no reason. But he's been very good nonetheless. 26 points, 24, 26. He's been very, very good. The targets have been there 10, 13, 16. Nothing not to like from DAVANTE Adams here. And Detroit is just so bad on defense at this point of the season. They're allowing 41.6 points per game to wide receivers, which is 4th most in the NFL. And they're 29th DVA versus the pass, and he's just straight up dominating, just like for targets and whatnot. He's tied for 2nd with a 30% target share. Same with weighted opportunity share as well. In all the wide receivers besides him on this team are just hot garbage, and the tight end's hot garbage as well. So he's going to get force-fed targets here. They really have no choice. I mean, Lazard's not that good. Allison sucks. MVS sucks. So Jimmy Graham's old and dusty, so it's really just DAVANTE Adams and Aaron Jones on this team right now. And yeah, he's going to get the Darius Slay shadow. I don't want to hear anything about that. He's not been that good this season, and he's not going to stop DAVANTE Adams. He's performed well against him in the past, so don't care about Darius Slay whatsoever. And they also have a 27-point team total, and I think a lot of that comes from DAVANTE Adams and Aaron Jones. So Adams, I don't see how he flops here. They have incentive to win this game. DAVANTE Adams, I like him a lot this week. I think him and Julio Jones are the 2 top wide receiver plays. Obviously, Michael Thomas is right there too, but I just think point per dollar wise, these 2 can just be right up there with Michael Thomas. Scrolling down a little bit, don't like any of these wide receivers, but I do have some interest in A.J. Brown in tournaments at 7K. I wouldn't call him a cash play, but I think he's an excellent pairing with Ryan Tannehill in GPPs. Brown's been fantastic. I mean, 15 points, 28 points, 36 points these past 3 games. Did he have a big game week 12 as well? Yeah, week 12 versus Jacksonville, had 26 fantasy points. The targets have been there, 7, 13. Last week, he got the Marshawn Lattimore shadow, and he did have a 49-yard rushing touchdown, which pretty much saved his day. But other than that, he had the Marshawn Lattimore shadow and did not perform very well. But nonetheless, the targets are going to be there. And he smashed Houston last time. He had 13 targets, 8 catches, 114 yards, got into the end zone, 28 fantasy points. A.J. Brown was fantastic. I don't see how it doesn't happen again. Houston sucks versus the pass. The Titans need to win this game. I think Ryan Tannehill and A.J. Brown can both have, obviously, one has a good game. The other one's going to have a good game as well. So don't mind the pairing whatsoever in GPPs. It's a little bit of expensive pairing, more than I like it to be, but I still think it's a pretty good play. Robert Woods. Again, I liked him a lot earlier in the week, but now that there's news that the Rams might not play their starters, maybe they get pulled early, I just can't take the risk there, especially at 7K. Same with Cooper Kupp. Tyler Boyd, don't mind. Perriman's a little expensive. And I mean, outside interest, but this is a core plays video, so I'm not going to talk about him. Let's see. Going on the list here, Jarvis Landry, he comes in at 5,900. Yeah, he's got the questionable tag, but I'm going to assume he's going to play. So I like him quite a bit, actually, and I think I'm going to hop back on the Landry train. He was cheap, and everyone was playing him. Now the price has caught up to him for the recent weeks. Now it's gone back down a little bit, 5,900, and I think he's a very safe play. I mean, he's been pretty consistent. The targets have been consistent. 9 targets, 8 targets, 7, 11, 13, 7, 10, 13, 10. Targets are really not an issue here, and the guy's pretty talented, and he's got a better connection with Baker than he does than Odell does right now. So I would rather play Landry for about 200 more than Odell, and if you look at the numbers, this would suggest it's not a good matchup versus Cincy through the air, and it's really not. They've actually been pretty good versus wide receivers. Now, DAVANTE Parker might have something to say about that last week, but still, they're pretty good versus outside wide receivers, but they do struggle versus slot receivers, and that's where Landry's running the majority of the routes that he's running, and they're allowing over 21 points per game to slot wide receivers, which is a very plus matchup for Landry comparative to the rest of the league. And since he has been playing better, and the Browns have not been playing that good, so I do expect this game to be a little bit competitive here. And these Browns-Bengals games are usually pretty decent for fantasy purposes, so don't mind Jarvis Landry. And the last game versus Cincy wasn't that great. He still had 7 targets, 4 catches, 76 yards, 11 fantasy points. I think he does a little bit more. I think he gets into the end zone this week. So I do like Jarvis Landry. I do think he is a pretty intriguing play. Let's go down a little bit. Odell's 200 cheaper, but you just can't really play the guy right now. But I do think we could look at Justin Watson here at 4,900. I don't think he's the worst play in the world. And again, we're scraping the bottom of the barrel because there's not a lot of great plays down here. But at 4,900, he's in play just because Evans and Godwin aren't playing, and Scotty Miller's on IR. So, and Jameis is going to get 300 plus yards anyway, so it's got to come from somewhere. And it's pretty much going to be Perriman, Watson, and the tight ends are going to be involved, and maybe a couple passes to Ronald Jones, but I like Justin Watson here. He did see 10 targets in the last game versus Houston on Saturday where he had 15 fantasy points. They get into the end zone. Now, he's not going to be a high yardage guy. And I kind of view him more as like a Danny Amendola in terms of being more of a check down guy. Not going to have huge yardage gains, but he's going to get targets, the shorter to intermediate route kind of guy. And, sometimes he can present solid games, and I think that's what we're going to get from Justin Watson. We have a 48-point total, which is the highest on the slate right now. Tight spread, should be a pretty competitive game. It's a good matchup versus Atlanta. They're 26th DVA versus the pass. Bottom half in points given up to wide receivers. So Justin Watson, don't hate him. Played the majority of the snaps in that game. And he actually could have had a longer touchdown, but Jameis overthrew him, and Watson also stumbled. So it was like a perfect bad storm. So I don't mind Justin Watson here. I think he's a pretty solid play at 4,900 if you want cheap exposure to that game. You can also look at Sims Jr. here at 4,700, Steven Sims. So I don't know if a lot of people are talking about this guy. He's kind of going under the radar, but he's actually been having pretty good past two games, and the targets have been there. And with Trey Quinn on IR, Sims has been low-key balling out. Past 3 games, 25 points, 10 targets, 15 points, 11 targets, 8 points, 7 targets. Not too bad at all. Now the price has come up. He was pretty much free. 4,700 still isn't a terrible price. He did see 70% of the snaps last week too. Now, this isn't a great matchup. Dallas is actually pretty good through the air, but being 10.5-point road dogs, I would expect them to have to pass the ball quite a bit. And Dallas is 24th DVA versus the pass, so I actually don't hate Sims here. He's going to get target volume, and he's actually been pretty solid, so don't hate the idea of using Sims. You could also look at Greg Ward. I actually prefer Greg Ward at the same price tag just because it's a much better matchup. So Greg Ward, he's been producing just out of necessity, 9 targets, 5 targets, 7 points, 19 points, 11 points. He's been fine. And, Jeffrey's gone. Aguilar's hurt. Ertz is banged up. And if Ertz happened to miss this game, Ward would pretty much be close to a lock for me just because it's a great matchup. And Carson Wentz has to throw the ball to somebody. It'd pretty much be Goddard, Sanders, and Ward at that point with Arcega-Whiteside mixed in. But I still think he's a pretty solid play despite a little bit of a price hike. He was $3K versus Washington. That was cheap. Obviously, it's free. 4,200 versus Dallas wasn't too bad either. Now, 4,700 makes you think about it a little bit, but he's been fine, so I think we can trust him. And again, the Eagles need to win this game to make the playoffs, so I can easily see them winning this game through the air, which most teams do versus the Giants. They're 31st DVA versus the pass. 42.3 points per game, which is tied second most. So I think Greg Ward's a pretty solid play here at 4,700. One of my favorite value receivers on the entire slate. Christian Kirk's cheap, but I don't know if I really want to pair anybody with Brett Hundley. If Kyler Murray's good to go, I don't mind Christian Kirk at all. 4,700, he become one of probably the better plays at wide receiver this week. I just don't know if Murray's going to play. Let's see, going down the list even more. Russell Gage at 4,400 is not the worst play going up against Tampa Bay. He had the targets are there pretty much every single week, but he's not having huge yardage games, but 6 targets, 6, 4, 9. Last game versus Tampa, I believe this was without Austin Hooper. I can't remember off the top. I think Austin Hooper was out in this game, but he had 10 targets, 8 catches, 15 fantasy points, had a touchdown called back because he didn't really catch it into the end zone. So he's actually been okay. 8 points, 10 points the past 2 games. Not expecting a lot of out of Russell Gage, but it's a good matchup. Tampa Bay's getting destroyed by wide receivers. And if they're going to put extra attention on Julio, Russell Gage should pretty much just be running free here. So I don't think the defense is going to care too much about what Russell Gage does. So maybe you get a cheap touchdown here, get you about 40 to 50 yards, 5 catches. Don't hate Russell Gage here at this price point. And you could also look at Randall Cobb. I believe was it last week he had a pretty solid game. I know Mark Cooper struggled. Yeah, Mark Cooper had 12 targets, only 4 catches. And I believe he even got benched for a little bit in part of that game. But Randall Cobb had 7 targets last week, 5 catches, 12 fantasy points. Going up against Washington. Now, if Dak's going to struggle to throw the ball down the field, I don't hate the idea of using Randall Cobb on these short to intermediate routes. So don't hate Randall Cobb at 3,900. I actually think he's somewhat of an okay play. And again, if these Rams are if all the starters get benched, you could look at Josh Reynolds. I think he's 3,200. You could play him. It's a great matchup versus Arizona. Blake Bortles is the backup, I believe. So Blake Bortles will get some run. Josh Reynolds, he had 3 targets, 4 targets the past 2 games. And if he's the wide receiver 1 on the team, maybe flirts with 10 targets. I don't know. It's a great matchup versus Arizona. I believe they're giving up the second most points per game to wide receivers, or at least tied for second most. So I don't hate Josh Reynolds at 3,200 if he happens to be the the number 1 wide receiver on this team. But as of right now, it's just complete guesswork. I have no idea. We'll know, probably on Saturday by the time the lineup builder video goes around. So I won't leave you guys hanging there. Now on to the tight end position. Travis Kelce's, he's pretty much always the tight end 1. Andrews isn't going to play. Ertz, he's questionable. If he was a full go, I'd like Zach Ertz quite a bit, but I don't know. I don't really want to play a banged up 6K tight end. You could look at Austin Hooper here if you just want exposure to this game. I wouldn't hate the idea of using that. He had a great game last week, 9 targets, 7 catches, 82 yards. Had 15.2 fantasy points. This is a pretty good matchup versus Tampa Bay. I believe they're bottom 10 versus tight ends in fantasy points given up. I know earlier in the season they were bottom 2. Gotten a little bit better there as their defense has just gotten better in general. But the price came up, so he was only 4,400 last week, which is just a very dumb mispricing. It didn't make any sense to me. 5,800 makes you think about it, but if you just want to stack him up with like Julio Jones and Matt Ryan, I don't hate the idea of using that. It's just he's a little bit expensive, and I'm not sure we're going to have the salary to pay up for tight end this week. But I think Austin Hooper's fine. Tyler Higbee, again, I don't know what they're going to do with the starters here. If he was a full go while the starters were playing, he'd be my favorite tight end play this week. He's just been an absolute animal the past 4 weeks. 22, 26, 21, 26, 11 targets, 14, 11, 8. The yards, 4 100-yard plus games in a row. And then the first game was versus Arizona. That's when he was free, 2,500, had 26 fantasy points. If he was a full go, you'd have to like Tyler Higbee. But again, I have no idea, so I can only just tell you that if he was a full go, he'd be good. If not, obviously you can't play Tyler Higbee at that price point. But Dallas Goedert, I like Dallas Goedert here quite a bit at 4,900. So if Ertz happened to miss, we would probably pretty much try our best to lock in Goedert, but I like him either way considering Ertz is banged up, so I think they're going to lean on Goedert a little bit more here. And he's seen consistent targets all season, but he did see a career-high 12 targets last week, and he just balled out. 9 catches, 91 yards, got into the end zone, 24 fantasy points, his best game all year. And again, incentive to win this game, so I don't mind Dallas Goedert at all. I think a Dallas Goedert and Carson Wentz pairing is just fine in all formats. So Dallas Goedert, definitely on my radar. Now, the Giants have been pretty solid versus tight ends this season, but Dallas Goedert's talented. They suck versus through the air in general. I don't really look into that too much. You can also look at O.J. Howard at 4,300. So again, this is just pretty much a lack of options that make Howard an okay play. He's playing all the snaps he can handle right now. He's been like in the high 80s, low 90s as of right now, and the targets have been there, but it just really hasn't amounted to much. But he had a bad drop in the last game. It could have been a big play, but it hit him right in the forearm. It could have been a big play, but OJ Howard. But he's been such a disappointment this season. But I like exposure to this game. He's not a completely safe play, but I like the targets he had last week. And if he could just come down with a couple more of those, you'd get you double-digit points. And at 4,300, I would take that. So OJ Howard's definitely on my radar. You could also look at Cameron Brate. I believe he ended up having a decent amount of targets last game. 5 targets for him. Not too bad. He had 7 targets versus Detroit. 3 points is not great, though. So you're pretty much hoping for a touchdown of Cameron Brate, but he's so cheap at 3,200. I mean, you're just pretty much hoping for a touchdown, but it could definitely be possible. We've seen Cameron Brate score touchdowns before. You could also look at someone like Hayden Hurst. He might get some extra run with, Mark Andrews isn't going to play. I wouldn't hate the idea of using Hayden Hurst. I don't know how RG3 is going to use him, but we'll see. Again, you're going to have to. It's hard to project these guys that are backups that are going to be in like new roles, but I mean, someone to keep on your radar. You could also look at. That's pretty much it. I mean, Noah Fant versus Oakland's not terrible. We've seen him flash upside games, but he also has these low 4 games. 3 points last week versus Detroit, 7 versus KC, 24 versus Houston. That was nice. Then, 1 point, 4 points, 9, 23. He's pretty hit or miss, but it's a good matchup versus Oakland. I don't remember what he did in the first game. He had first game of his career, had 4.4 fantasy points. So, again, someone to keep on your radar. The tight end position kind of sucks this week outside of a couple guys. That's pretty much going to be it for this video. As for the defenses, Patriots, yeah, they're a good play for sure. Wouldn't hate Patriots and SONY Michel as a GPP pairing. Saints are fine versus Carolina. Boger sucks. We saw the Colts defense smash versus them. That was mostly off of punt return touchdowns, but still, I don't think Will Greer's going to do any damage. Bills, they're going to be resting some key starters at some point in this game. I read that they will be starting a lot of these guys, but it's the Jets. Browns, defenses are kind of whatever. It's just whoever fits, and then you cross your fingers and hope they don't get blown up. Sometimes you pay top dollar for a defense and they suck, and then these random low-tier defenses end up doing very well. You can play Steelers versus backups. I don't hate the idea of using that. They're only 3K. Green Bay versus Detroit's not too bad either. Again, just pretty much plug and play your defense and see whoever fits, preferably in a low total. But I mean, you could even look at Atlanta versus Tampa Bay. I believe Atlanta is only, what's their price? No, they're priced up at 3,400. Okay, I thought they might be a little bit cheap. I guess not. So I guess that doesn't really come a good value. But, Jameis Winston loves to turn the ball over. So either way, I'm going to leave you guys with that. No one really cares about defenses. This was a really long video. I apologize. I did not mean for it to be this long. But I hope this video was helpful. If it was, remember to leave a like. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Really helps me out. Really appreciate it. You follow me on Twitter, ChrisPanel16. And I'll see you guys in the next video.